My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 27 years old, and if you'd told me a year ago that the lowest point of my career would involve the lingering scent of lukewarm coffee and the sticky residue of someone else's celebratory pastry, I wouldn't have believed you. But there I was. The large mahogany table in Conference Room A, usually a symbol of power and decision-making, was now my solitary domain of discarded paper cups, crumpled napkins, and the half-eaten remnants of a breakfast spread I'd organized at dawn. It was just after 10 a.m. Our big client presentation, the one I'd poured 60-hour weeks into for the past 2 months, had just concluded. It had gone well, exceptionally well, if I was to judge by the relieved smiles and the client's enthusiastic handshake. But the smiles weren't for me. As soon as the client had departed, my manager, Mr. Henderson, a man whose approval I'd once naively craved, clapped his hands together. "All right, team," he'd boomed, his voice full of false bonhomie. "To celebrate this massive win and to properly welcome our rising star Leo, lunch is on the company at the Gilded Spoon." Leo, the golden intern, flushed with a mixture of pride and feigned modesty. He'd been with us for exactly 3 weeks and 2 days. His contribution to the presentation? He'd successfully managed to connect the projector on the second try and had offered Mr. Henderson a mint just before the client arrived. Groundbreaking stuff, apparently. I watched, almost in slow motion, as my colleagues, Mark, who'd used my research without credit, Jessica, who'd taken my ideas in a brainstorming session and presented them as her own, and even old Mr. Abernathy from accounting, who barely knew what project we were on, all gathered their things, chattering excitedly. They swarmed around Leo, congratulating him on, well, I wasn't sure what. Being young and well-connected, perhaps? His uncle was a board member, a fact Mr. Henderson never failed to mention subtly. No one looked at me, not a single glance. It was as if I'd become part of the room's fixtures, like the ficus plant in the corner, or the slightly flickering overhead light they always complained about but never fixed. I was just there. Mr. Henderson, ushering Leo towards the door like a prized racehorse, actually brushed past my shoulder without an apology, without even a flicker of recognition. He was too busy telling Leo, loud enough for me to hear, "This is how we reward true potential, son. Stick with me and you'll go far." The door clicked shut behind them, their laughter and animated discussion about appetizers fading down the hallway, leaving me in a sudden, deafening silence. The only sounds were the hum of the air conditioning and the faint clatter of my own hands as I began, almost mechanically, to collect the trash. The irony wasn't lost on me. I, who had drafted the strategy, crunched the numbers, and polished every slide until it gleamed, was now literally cleaning up their mess. The sting of it was sharp, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. It wasn't just about a missed lunch. It was about the relentless, soul-crushing invisibility. It was the culmination of months, no, years of being overlooked, my ideas credited to others, my dedication taken for granted. They saw a quiet, unassuming workhorse, someone to pile tasks onto, someone who would just get it done without complaint. They mistook my professionalism for passivity, my diligence for a lack of ambition. But as I stood there, a discarded agenda in my hand, with Leo's name printed in bold as a key contributor, while mine was relegated to a footnote under logistical support, something inside me didn't break. It solidified, hardened. That echo of their departing footsteps wasn't just a sound, it was a countdown. They had no idea who they'd truly left behind. They couldn't fathom the meticulous work I was doing when no one was watching, the connections I was forging, the future I was painstakingly building for myself, brick by silent brick. This humiliation, this blatant act of erasure, wasn't an ending. Oh no, it was the fuel I desperately needed. They thought they were celebrating a win with their golden boy. They had no clue they were merely setting the stage for my ultimate comeback, a revelation that would shake the very foundations of their comfortable, biased little world. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into your work, only to be treated like you're part of the furniture while someone less deserving, maybe the boss's favorite, gets all the accolades and opportunities? That feeling of being utterly undervalued, it's enraging, isn't it? Share your story in the comments below. Let's talk about it, because knowing you're not alone in these battles makes a huge difference. And if you want to see exactly how I turned this moment of utter disrespect into a victory they never saw coming, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because this is just the beginning. That incident with the meeting room, the celebratory lunch I wasn't invited to, it wasn't an isolated event. It was just the most brazen, the most public display of what had become the suffocating norm in my 2 years at Sterling and Vance. When I first joined, bright-eyed and eager, I believed hard work and talent were the currency of success. I quickly learned that at Sterling and Vance, the currency was something else entirely. Proximity to power, a knack for self-promotion, and, it seemed, being male or at least fitting a certain mold that I, apparently, did not. Mr. Henderson, my direct manager, was the architect of this culture. He had a practiced smile that rarely reached his eyes, especially when he was talking to me. In meetings, if I offered an idea, he'd often nod vaguely, then turn to Mark, my senior colleague, and say, "Mark, what are your thoughts on that approach?" Mark, who had a talent for repackaging other people's work, would then essentially repeat my idea, perhaps with a slightly more confident tone, or a buzzword Henderson liked, and Henderson would beam. "Excellent, Mark. That's the kind of proactive thinking we need." I'd sit there, a lump of ice forming in my chest, feeling my contribution dissolve into thin air. I remember the Maxwell account, a pitch we were all desperate to win. I spent 3 consecutive all-nighters developing a comprehensive market analysis, uncovering a niche opportunity no one else had spotted. I emailed my findings to the team, clearly outlining the strategy. The next day, in the pre-client meeting, Mark presented my entire analysis, my slides barely altered, as his own. He even used my exact phrasing for the key recommendations. When he finished, Henderson clapped him on the back. "Brilliant, Mark. Absolutely brilliant. That's why you're my go-to guy." I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? Accuse a senior colleague in front of my manager who clearly favored him? I saw the quick, triumphant smirk Mark shot my way when Henderson wasn't looking. It was a clear message. I can do this, and you can't stop me. The bitterness of it was a taste I became all too familiar with. Then there was Jessica. Her methods were subtler. She was the queen of the collaborative brainstorming session. She'd invite me for coffee, ostensibly to pick my brain on a project. I, still foolishly believing in teamwork, would share my thoughts, my half-formed concepts, my research. A week later, a polished proposal would land on Henderson's desk, under Jessica's name, incorporating all those raw ideas, now presented as her singular stroke of genius. Henderson would praise her innovative spirit and ability to think outside the box. When I once tentatively pointed out that some of those core concepts had originated from our discussion, Jessica had looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and said, "Oh, Sarah, you know how ideas bounce around in these creative sessions. It's all about the final execution, isn't it?" Henderson had nodded sagely, adding, "Indeed, Jessica. Inspiration is one thing, perspiration and polish quite another." I felt like I was being gaslit, my own thoughts stolen and then used to diminish me further. The favoritism wasn't always about outright idea theft. It was in the assignments. Mark and the other male colleagues, and later Leo, would get the high-visibility projects, the client-facing opportunities, the chances to travel and network. I would be assigned the painstaking background research, the data compilation, the logistical coordination, the essential but unglamorous work that kept everything afloat but earned no public praise. If I asked for more challenging assignments, Henderson would pat me on the arm condescendingly and say, "We need your reliability on these crucial support tasks, Sarah. Not everyone has your attention to detail for the nitty-gritty." It was a backhanded compliment designed to keep me in my place. My performance reviews were a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. Consistently meets expectations. Valuable team player. Reliable. Never exceeds expectations in a leadership capacity. Never shows strong potential for advancement. The raise was always the standard, minimal cost of living adjustment. Meanwhile, I'd hear whispers of Mark's bonus, or see Jessica being taken out for celebratory lunches for Landing, a project I'd done 70% of the groundwork for. The arrival of Leo, the golden intern, was simply the pattern on steroids. His uncle on the board was an unspoken golden ticket. Suddenly, even the pretense of meritocracy vanished. Leo, with his charming smile and complete lack of experience, was lauded for simply showing up. He'd be invited to strategy meetings I, with 2 years of solid contributions, was excluded from. Henderson would explain it away as mentoring new talent, but it felt like a deliberate slight, a constant reminder of my perceived inadequacy in their eyes. I tried, in the beginning. I really did. I'd speak up more forcefully in meetings, only to be interrupted or have Henderson say, "Let's take that offline, Sarah," effectively silencing me. I'd meticulously document my contributions, sending follow-up emails summarizing my input, hoping to create a paper trail. It made no difference. They saw what they wanted to see, a quiet, efficient worker bee, not a future leader. The emotional toll was immense. There were nights I'd go home and just stare at the ceiling, replaying every dismissive comment, every stolen idea, every overlooked effort. Self-doubt began to creep in. Was I not good enough? Was I oversensitive? Was I just not cut out for this corporate world? It was a lonely, draining battle, fought mostly in the confines of my own mind. The injustice of it all was a constant, simmering fire. But what they didn't realize was that fire wasn't just consuming me. It was forging something new, something stronger. In that sea of indifference and calculated slights, there was one small, unexpected island of recognition. Her name was Eleanor Vance, and yes, the Vance in Sterling and Vance. She was the granddaughter of one of the original founders, a semi-retired board member who occasionally visited the office, more out of a sense of legacy than active management. Most people, including Henderson, treated her with a kind of polite, almost reverent deference, but also as a bit of a relic, someone not quite in tune with the cutthroat pace of the modern business world. They underestimated her, much like they underestimated me. I first encountered Eleanor not in a boardroom, but in the staff kitchen. I was there late one evening, microwaving a sad-looking dinner I'd brought from home, trying to power through yet another urgent data analysis Henderson had dropped on my desk at 5 p.m. Eleanor walked in, looking for tea. She wasn't dressed in the severe power suits of the other executives. She wore elegant, comfortable clothes and had a warm, observant gaze. She simply smiled and asked, "Working late again, dear?" I, startled, mumbled something about deadlines. She made her tea, then, instead of leaving, she sat at the small kitchen table. "You know," she said, her voice gentle but with an undercurrent of shrewdness, "my grandfather always said the hardest workers are often the quietest. They're too busy doing the work to broadcast it." She looked directly at me. "I see you, Sarah. I see the hours you put in, the quality of your reports. The details matter, and you, my dear, are a master of details." I was so taken aback by this unsolicited praise, this direct acknowledgement, that I could only stare. In an environment where my contributions were either ignored or appropriated, her words were like a balm to a raw wound. We chatted for a few more minutes that evening. About the company's history, about her grandfather's business philosophies, a far cry from Henderson's winner-takes-all mentality. It wasn't a long conversation, but it planted a seed of hope, a flicker of validation that I desperately needed. After that, Eleanor would occasionally stop by my desk when she was in the office. She'd ask about my projects, not in a superficial way, but with genuine interest. She'd inquire about the challenges, the intricacies. Sometimes she'd share an anecdote from her early days in the business, often with a subtle lesson embedded within. She never directly criticized Henderson or the prevailing culture, but her very presence, her quiet attention to those outside the favored circle, spoke volumes. I remember one particular instance, about 6 months before the meeting room incident. I had developed a new system for tracking client engagement, something that could significantly improve our retention rates. I presented it in a team meeting. Henderson had given his usual non-committal nod and moved on. Mark had later cornered me, asking for a few more details so he could fully understand it. I knew where that was heading. But, unbeknownst to me, Eleanor had been in the office that day and had apparently requested the meeting minutes. A few days later, she called me into her small, rarely used office. "Sarah," she said, gesturing to a printout of my proposal. "This is excellent, truly innovative. Why isn't Henderson championing this?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She just smiled knowingly. "Don't worry, dear. I've been around this block a few times. Some people are threatened by talent they can't control or take credit for." Then, she did something remarkable. She picked up her phone and called Henderson, right there in front of me. "Robert," she said, her tone polite but firm. "I've just been reviewing Sarah Chen's proposal on client engagement tracking. It's quite brilliant. I'd like you to explore its implementation immediately and keep me updated on its progress. Sarah clearly has a strong grasp of our clients' needs." Henderson, on the other end, must have been stammering his agreement. When she hung up, Eleanor winked at me. "Sometimes," she said, "a little nudge from an old dinosaur can be useful." For a brief period after that, things improved slightly. My system was partially implemented, though Mark still managed to position himself as a key figure in its rollout. But Eleanor's intervention showed me that not everyone was blind. Someone saw my worth. She became my silent champion, a discreet source of encouragement. She never promised to solve all my problems, and she wasn't in a position to overhaul the entire company culture single-handedly. But her belief in me, her quiet acts of support, were invaluable. They reinforced my own growing resolve that I wasn't the problem. The toxic environment was. Eleanor didn't offer me a ladder to climb out, but she handed me a mirror, reflecting back a capable, intelligent woman whose contributions mattered, even if the loudest voices in the room refused to acknowledge it. And that, in its own way, was a lifeline. It helped me keep my head above water while I started to build my own escape raft. While they were busy patting each other on the back, taking credit for my work, and fawning over Leo, I was doing more than just my assigned tasks. The constant sidelining, the feeling of being invisible, it lit a different kind of fire under me. It wasn't just anger. It was a cold, hard determination. If they wouldn't give me opportunities, I would create my own. If they wouldn't see my value, I would make it impossible to ignore. My silent rise, as I later came to think of it, began in the quiet hours, fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer grit. My official role involved a lot of data analysis and report generation, the grunt work they so readily assigned me. But within that data, I started seeing patterns, opportunities that Sterling and Vance was completely missing. Our company was focused on traditional, large-scale corporate clients, a market that was becoming increasingly saturated and competitive. But the data was screaming about a burgeoning sector, innovative tech startups, agile and fast-growing, but often lacking the strategic financial guidance that a firm like ours could provide, if only we were willing to adapt our approach. I started spending my evenings and weekends not just doing my job, but doing another job. I began researching these startups, understanding their unique financial challenges, their funding cycles, their growth trajectories. I delved into venture capital trends, fintech innovations, and disruptive business models. My little apartment became a command center, walls covered in charts and notes that no one at Sterling and Vance would ever see. I was building a knowledge base, a specialization, that was far beyond what my current role demanded, or what Henderson and his golden boys even conceived of. I also started discreetly networking, not at the stuffy corporate golf days Henderson favored, but at tech meetups, startup incubators, and online forums. I wasn't Sarah from Sterling and Vance, the quiet analyst. I was just Sarah, someone genuinely interested in their work, someone who could ask insightful questions, someone who understood their world. I offered pro bono advice on small financial queries, helped a few fledgling entrepreneurs refine their pitch decks, not for immediate gain, but to build trust and understand their needs from the ground up. These weren't official Sterling and Vance clients, not yet. They were seeds I was planting. Eleanor Vance, in her own subtle way, had also given me an idea. During one of our chats, she'd mentioned her grandfather's belief in lifelong learning. "The world changes, Sarah," she'd said. "The skills that got you here won't necessarily get you there." So, I enrolled in advanced online courses in financial technology, data science, and strategic management, all funded out of my own pocket. I'd study before dawn, during my lunch break, which I usually ate at my desk anyway, and late into the night. Every new skill, every new piece of knowledge, felt like adding another arrow to my quiver. While my colleagues were polishing their office politics, I was polishing my expertise. The meeting room incident, as humiliating as it was, became a turning point. It confirmed what I already suspected. Staying at Sterling and Vance under the current leadership was a dead end. But I wasn't going to just quit. I was going to leave on my own terms, and I was going to take something with me. Not office supplies, but proof of concept. That major client presentation, the one I'd been left to clean up after, had actually contained a small, almost hidden section based on my independent research into a new market segment, a tech-adjacent industry that our traditional client base was just starting to explore. I had fought to include it, and Henderson had grudgingly allowed a single slide, probably thinking it was too niche to matter. But the client, a more forward-thinking company than Henderson realized, had zeroed in on that one slide. Their most enthusiastic questions had been about that very segment. Henderson and Mark, caught off guard, had fumbled through answers, relying on the superficial talking points I'd prepared for them. That was my proof. My niche idea had resonated. While Henderson and the team were off celebrating Leo's projector skills, I wasn't just tidying up. I was strategizing. I realized that the network I'd been building, the expertise I'd been cultivating in the tech startup space, wasn't just a side project anymore. It was the foundation of my next move. I started to quietly formalize my research into a comprehensive business proposal, not for Sterling and Vance, but for myself. I identified several promising startups from my network who were on the cusp of needing serious financial strategy and investment guidance. I was still doing my job at Sterling and Vance, still delivering the reports, still enduring the casual dismissals, but now there was a purpose behind my quiet diligence. Every ignored idea, every stolen credit, every condescending remark from Henderson, every smug look from Mark just added more fuel to my secret engine. They saw me as a cog in their machine. They had no idea I was building an entirely new machine, one where I would be the one in the driver's seat. My silence wasn't submission. It was preparation. My invisibility was my camouflage. And the storm was gathering. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where you knew you had to make a change, where you started building your own path while still navigating a tough environment, hit that like button. It takes incredible strength to build in silence. Let's acknowledge that. Your support helps others find these stories of resilience. The moment arrived 3 months after the infamous meeting room lunch. It was the quarterly all-hands meeting, a grand affair held in the company's largest conference hall. Mr. Sterling himself, the usually absent senior partner, was present, along with the entire board, including Leo's influential uncle and, thankfully, Eleanor Vance. Henderson was in his element, preening and posturing, delivering a presentation filled with graphs showing modest growth and platitudes about teamwork and innovation. Mark and Jessica were positioned prominently, ready to receive their customary pats on the back. Leo, naturally, was seated in the front row, looking like a miniature version of Henderson. Henderson was just wrapping up his segment on future growth areas, ironically touching upon the need to explore emerging markets, a vague concept he hadn't put any real thought into beyond it sounding good. He then opened the floor for questions or announcements from the board. This was it. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the composed exterior I'd carefully constructed. I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head. Eleanor Vance, with a subtle nod in my direction that no one else would have caught, raised her hand. "Mr. Henderson," she began, her voice clear and carrying across the room. "While your presentation was comprehensive, I believe there's a significant development concerning our firm's engagement with the tech startup sector that perhaps you're not yet fully briefed on, but which I feel is pertinent to this discussion of future growth." A ripple of confusion went through the room. Henderson looked flustered. "Ah, Mrs. Vance. Indeed? I wasn't aware of any major new initiative in that specific area beyond our usual exploratory outlook." He shot a quick, irritated glance at Mark, as if expecting him to have this information. Mark just shrugged, looking equally bewildered. Eleanor smiled serenely. "Perhaps not an internal initiative, Robert, but certainly one that will significantly impact Sterling and Vance. In fact, I believe one of your own team members is best positioned to elaborate." She then turned, her gaze finding me where I sat, deliberately in a less conspicuous row. "Sarah Chen, would you care to enlighten us?" All heads swiveled towards me. The sudden, intense focus was like a physical force. I could feel Henderson's eyes burning into me, a mixture of shock and dawning suspicion. Mark and Jessica exchanged panicked looks. For a moment, the old fear, the ingrained habit of staying small, threatened to overwhelm me. But then I thought of that cold, lonely meeting room, the discarded pastry, Leo's smug face, and the years of quiet struggle. I took a deep breath and stood up. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I walked towards the front of the room, not to the main podium Henderson occupied, but to a smaller lectern off to the side, a space I had mentally claimed as my own. I had a simple USB drive in my hand. "Mr. Henderson, members of the board, colleagues. For the past year, alongside my duties here, I have been independently researching and developing a specialized consultancy model focused on providing strategic financial advisory services to Series A and Series B tech startups, a significantly underserved market with explosive growth potential." A low murmur spread through the hall. Henderson's face was turning a rather unpleasant shade of puce. "Independently? Miss Chen, what exactly are you implying?" he managed, his voice tight. "I'm not implying anything, Mr. Henderson," I replied calmly, plugging the USB into the presentation system. My own slides, crisp and professional, flashed onto the main screen, replacing Henderson's generic graphics. "I'm stating facts. I've identified and cultivated relationships with 3 high-potential tech firms, Innovatech Solutions, NextGen Robotics, and Cloudsphere AI, who have all, as of this morning, signed retainer agreements." I paused for effect. "Not with Sterling and Vance, but with my new firm, Phoenix Strategy Group, of which I am the founder and CEO." The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Then a gasp. It might have been Jessica. Henderson looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His jaw was literally hanging open. Mark's face was a mask of disbelief, his eyes wide. Leo just looked utterly lost. I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. "These 3 clients alone represent a projected first-year revenue stream that I believe significantly exceeds the new business generated by this entire department in the last quarter." I clicked to a slide showing the projected figures, clear and undeniable. "Phoenix Strategy Group will specialize in the very niche market analysis and agile financial structuring that I have, on several occasions, attempted to introduce here at Sterling and Vance, ideas that were perhaps ahead of their time for this firm's traditional focus." The dig was subtle, but I saw Eleanor Vance hide a small smile. "Furthermore," I added, turning to address the board more directly, "the initial seed funding for Phoenix Strategy Group has been secured in part thanks to the confidence of several angel investors who recognize the viability of this model and my unique expertise in this sector. One of whom, I should mention, is a significant former client of Sterling and Vance who felt their needs for innovative financial strategy were no longer being met here." This was a carefully placed bombshell, and I saw Mr. Sterling himself sit up straighter, his expression suddenly very, very interested. Henderson finally found his voice, sputtering, This is outrageous, preposterous. You can't just poach potential clients. This is a breach of something." "Actually, Mr. Henderson," I said, my tone cool and professional, "there has been no breach. These are new entities I cultivated independently, through networks established outside of my work for Sterling and Vance. My employment contract has been thoroughly reviewed by my legal counsel, and as of 8 a.m. this morning, my formal resignation was emailed to HR and to your office." I looked directly at him. "I believe you were at breakfast with Leo at the time, so you may have missed it." The collective intake of breath in the room was audible. The look of utter public humiliation dawning on Henderson's face was almost painful to watch. Almost. Mark looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Jessica was pale. Leo just stared, his golden boy shine completely extinguished. Eleanor Vance then spoke again, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "It seems to me, gentlemen," she said, addressing Mr. Sterling and the other board members, "that Sterling and Vance has just lost not only a highly talented individual, but also a significant opportunity in a key growth market due to a, shall we say, lack of internal foresight and talent recognition. Perhaps this is a moment for some serious reflection on how we cultivate and retain true innovators within our ranks. Mr. Sterling, looking from my confident stance to Henderson's apoplectic face, simply said, "Indeed, Eleanor, indeed." His gaze on Henderson was icy. I stood there for a moment longer, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in, not just for them, but for me too. The fear was gone, replaced by a profound sense of liberation, and yes, a deep, satisfying sense of triumph. I had taken their disrespect, their underestimation, their dismissal, and I had used it to build my own damn throne. The girl they left to clean the meeting room was now the CEO who had just walked away with their next big opportunity. The aftermath of that all-hands meeting was swift, and for some, brutal. The rest of the meeting was a blur of hushed whispers and stunned faces. Mr. Sterling adjourned it quickly, requesting a private meeting with Henderson and, pointedly, Eleanor Vance. I didn't need to be a fly on that wall to imagine the fireworks. I simply gathered my few personal belongings from my desk, a process that took all of 5 minutes, a testament to how little I felt I truly belonged there. As I was walking towards the elevator, my small box in hand, Mark approached me, his usual arrogance completely gone, replaced by a desperate, almost wheedling tone. "Sarah. Hey, Sarah. Listen. About everything. I mean, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. This Phoenix Strategy Group. It sounds interesting. Maybe there's room for collaboration. I have a lot of experience with client-facing roles, you know." I stopped and looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had built his career on the backs of others, who had smirked as he stole my ideas, now saw me as a potential lifeline. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. "Mark," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion other than a calm finality. "Phoenix Strategy Group is built on integrity and genuine expertise. I'm not sure your particular skill set would be a good fit." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply stated a fact. His face fell, the desperation turning into a flicker of his old resentment, but he knew he had no leverage. He just nodded mutely and slunk away. Jessica tried a different tactic later that day, catching me as I was about to leave the building for good. She rushed up, her eyes wide with a performance of sincerity I'd seen her use many times before. "Sarah! Oh my God, I am so incredibly thrilled for you. This is amazing. You were always so brilliant. I knew you were destined for great things. I always said you were the smartest one in the department, remember?" She conveniently forgot all the time she'd subtly undermined me or presented my ideas as her own. "Listen, if you ever need someone with strong project management skills, someone who really understands how to bring creative visions to life," I almost laughed. "Jessica," I cut her off, my patience wearing thin, "thank you for your belated compliments. But Phoenix Strategy is a very lean operation, and I'll be personally overseeing all project management for the foreseeable future." Her smile faltered. The message was clear. The door was closed. Her attempt to ride my coattails after years of trying to trip me was pathetic, and I had no intention of enabling it. The most surprising encounter, however, was with Mr. Henderson. He caught me by the parking garage elevator, looking disheveled and defeated. The bluster was gone. He looked smaller. "Chen," he started, then corrected himself. "Sarah, look, I may have underestimated you. This whole thing, it's a shock. The board is displeased." He paused, as if expecting sympathy. "Perhaps there's a way Sterling and Vance could invest in your venture? A partnership? It would be mutually beneficial. We have resources, infrastructure." This was the ultimate display of his inability to grasp what had happened. He still saw it in terms of what he could gain, how he could salvage his own position. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "Phoenix Strategy Group is and will remain independent. My vision for this company is very different from the culture fostered here. As for mutually beneficial, I believe I've already created the benefit for myself by leaving. Sterling and Vance had its chance to benefit from my work when I was an employee. That time has passed." I pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. "Goodbye, Mr. Henderson." The look of dawning realization that he had truly, irrevocably lost Not just an employee, but a significant business opportunity he had been too blind to see, was a far more satisfying leaving gift than any farewell lunch. I heard through the grapevine, and a rather pleased call from Eleanor Vance a week later, that Henderson was demoted. His future growth areas portfolio was handed to someone else, someone the board hoped had better vision. Mark's star dulled considerably without my research to prop him up, and Jessica found it much harder to collaborate her way to success when the primary source of her inspiration was gone. Leo, the golden intern, apparently decided the corporate world wasn't for him after all, and went back to relying on his uncle for his next venture. The dynamic had irrevocably shifted. I was no longer the quiet, overlooked analyst. I was Sarah Chen, CEO of Phoenix Strategy Group, a company built on the very principles Sterling and Vance had so carelessly discarded: innovation, integrity, and a genuine respect for talent, regardless of who it belonged to. I wasn't just setting new limits for how others treated me. I was defining a new game on my own terms. The satisfaction wasn't just in the venganza, as some might call it, but in the creation of something new and positive out of a negative experience. I hadn't just escaped a toxic environment, I had built my own, much healthier one, and it was thriving. Looking back on that whole saga, from the sticky coffee cups in that lonely meeting room to the launch of Phoenix Strategy Group, it's clear that what felt like my lowest point was actually the catalyst for my greatest transformation. For so long, I had sought validation from people who were incapable of giving it, in a system designed to keep people like me in a box. I craved their approval, their recognition, thinking that was the measure of my worth. I was wrong. The true measure of value isn't found in the fleeting praise of a biased boss or the hollow congratulations of insincere colleagues. It's not about being invited to the right lunches or having your name at the top of an agenda. True value is intrinsic. It's built through hard work, through dedication to your craft, through the courage to pursue your own vision even when no one else sees it. It's about knowing your own capabilities and not letting anyone else's limited perspective define you. That day, cleaning up after them, I felt small, insignificant, but that feeling, that deep, burning sense of injustice, became the spark. It forced me to stop looking outwards for approval and start looking inwards for strength. It pushed me to take all that overlooked talent, all those dismissed ideas, and build something for myself, on my own terms. Empowerment isn't something that's given to you. It's something you seize. Sometimes, you have to be your own hero, your own champion, especially when the world around you refuses to see your light. The journey wasn't easy. There were countless late nights, moments of self-doubt, and the constant fear of failure. But every small step forward, every new skill learned, every connection made in pursuit of my own goals, chipped away at that fear and replaced it with a quiet confidence. Eleanor Vance was a beacon, a reminder that allies can appear in the most unexpected places and that one person's belief can make a world of difference. But ultimately, the decision to rise, to fight back not with bitterness but with brilliance, was mine. My revenge, if you want to call it that, wasn't just about humiliating Henderson or Mark. It was about proving to myself and to anyone who has ever felt like me that you can rewrite your own narrative. You can turn neglect into motivation, disrespect into determination. You can build your own table if you're not offered a seat at theirs, and make it a much better, more inclusive, and more successful table at that. Phoenix Strategy Group is more than just a company to me. It's a testament to resilience, a symbol of what's possible when you refuse to let others dictate your worth. We're thriving, not just because we're good at what we do, but because we operate with the integrity and respect that was so sorely lacking in my previous environment. So, what would you have done in my place, standing in that meeting room, surrounded by the evidence of your own erasure? How would you have channeled that frustration? I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Every story shared is a thread that connects us, a reminder that these experiences, while painful, can be powerful launching pads. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. There are so many more stories of turnaround and triumph to share, and I wouldn't want you to miss a single one. Your journey matters, your voice matters, Never let anyone make you feel otherwise.